Tonight, a new law banning parking on pavements, but it may be some time before fines are being issued across Scotland. For campaigners and pedestrians, it can't come soon enough.
You can't get past at all, and I don't want to take him on the road. I just think it's quite selfish, actually.
There's too many cars and there's not enough room to park them. So what do? Where do the cars go?
Also making the headlines, the Prime Minister defends his Eat Out to Help Out scheme at the UK COVID inquiry, saying it saved countless jobs.
In sport, we had them rattled. Derek McInnes praises his Kilmarnock players after they beat the champions.
And yes, you will go to the ball, but will it be Cinderella or Cinderfella in Scottish Ballet's new production? I'm Kellyanne Woodland in Edinburgh.
And I'm John Mackay in Glasgow. This is the STV News at 6. Good evening. Parking on the pavement is now illegal in Scotland, and from today, drivers could be fined up to £100 by their local authority if they're caught doing it. So far, Edinburgh City Council is the only area that's committed to enforcing the law.
The rules also ban parking at dropped curbs and double parking in a bid to make pavements a safer place to walk and for those who have children in prams as well as wheelchair users. Courtney Cameron reports.
Well, it makes me go on the road. It makes me endanger my life.
Trying to get his wheelchair past cars on the pavement is a daily struggle for Eddie. He lives with cerebral palsy and says he's tired of putting his life at risk.
I'm fed up with it, basically. But see if it's a bigger wheelchair, how can I get by if more parked on the road? It's a nightmare.
From today, it's against the law to park like this in Scotland in a bid to help people like Eddie. But it's up to individual local authorities to enforce it. Drivers could now face a fine of up to £100. Edinburgh is the only city enforcing it and will start fining in January.
We're going for a full ban with absolutely no exemptions other than those mandated by the Scottish Government. So it's important we get it right, so next month is as quick as we can do that. It's been a long time coming, actually.
In Glasgow, there are no immediate plans to start issuing fines, but the City Council says it's undertaking parking assessments to help plan for enforcement in the future. Every car in this street in Glasgow's south side is parked on the pavement, and that paints a picture of this area as a whole. The people who live here say there's not enough space and they'd like to see something done about it.
I really find it quite tricky and quite dangerous, actually, and you can't get past at all.
If I struggle with a buggy, I'm with somebody either who's like sight impaired or in a wheelchair. They might struggle to move around as well.
It's very difficult because there's too many cars and there's not enough room to park them.
People getting hit by cars and things like that.
They don't have their private parking, so where they will park because there is no space.
After years of hard work, campaign groups have welcomed the ban.
This is long overdue. Pavements are safe places for people to walk, and it's been wrong that they've been encroached on by vehicles. Vehicles are getting bigger and bigger, taking up more and more space, and this resets the balance a little bit. We hope the public will do the right thing, but if not, we want councils to go out and enforce and keep the pavements clear.
Pavement parking is unsafe. It's unfair and it's now illegal, and it's important that people respect the rights of parents with double buggies or buggies, of people that are travelling on wheelchairs, or indeed those that are using guide dogs.
If more local authorities enforce penalty notices, pavement parking could be kicked to the curb in the new year. Courtney Cameron, STV News, Glasgow.
Rishi Sunak has told the UK COVID inquiry that the Eat Out to Help Out scheme saved countless jobs, despite criticism from leading scientific advisors about the risk of spreading the virus.
The Prime Minister was giving evidence amid a political crisis over his plans to revive his Rwanda deportation plan. Our Westminster correspondent Paris Goutsianis has more.
Well, behind me, Tory MPs are meeting right now to decide whether to torpedo Rishi Sunak's flagship immigration policy. But before he can face that looming crisis, there was the small matter for the Prime Minister of defending his record as Chancellor during the pandemic, including that controversial Eat Out to Help Out policy. And a warning, my report does contain flash photography. As the UK reopened in the summer of 2020, Mr. Sunak was the architect of the Eat Out to Help Out scheme. Top scientific advisors have told the inquiry that they weren't consulted on the plan.
All the data, all the evidence, all the polling, all the input from those companies suggested that unless we did something, many of those jobs would have been at risk with devastating consequences for those people and their families.
Mr. Sunak added that scientists had signed off on the reopening of restaurants and insisted there is no evidence that Eat Out to Help Out contributed to the second wave of the virus.
There was almost a month between announcement and commencement. I've outlined my reasons for why we implemented the policy and why we thought it was the right thing to do, and I believe it was the right thing to do to safeguard those jobs in the context of the safe reopening that had already been agreed. But at none of those moments, in those meetings, there was plenty of opportunity for people to have raised it either with me or with the Prime Minister. I don't recall, and the minutes do not suggest, that it was raised at all.
Was it brought to the attention of the devolved administrations? Did you ask for their input or consult with them in any way before the scheme was imposed and introduced in the other four nations, the other three nations?
Again, that wouldn't have been ordinary policy. It wasn't on things like the furlough scheme or other support that we did. These are competencies of the UK government.
On lockdowns, he didn't stray beyond defending his economic role.
My, I'd say, almost constitutional responsibility as Chancellor of the Exchequer was to make sure that the Prime Minister had the economic, the analysis and the advice relating to the economic and fiscal implications or consequences of the decisions that he was considering.
And said nothing to add to previous evidence of chaotic decision-making in Number 10.
Were you aware that his closest advisors had seemingly unanimously taken the view that there was a lack of efficiency? The administration is described privately as brutal and useless, or criminally incompetent, or operationally chaotic. Was any of that known to you?
No, I don't think any of those comments were shared with me.
Done with one set of tough questions, on to the next.
So, as you suggest there, Paris, attention turns now to a vote on the Rwanda scheme tomorrow. What's at stake for the Prime Minister?
Well, Rishi Sunak could have walked away from the plan to deport asylum seekers to Rwanda when the Supreme Court ruled it was unlawful. But instead, he's doubled down, publishing emergency legislation declaring that Rwanda is a safe place to send people who cross the English Channel. That legislation is voted on tomorrow night, and if it's defeated, it would be a devastating blow to Mr. Sunak's authority. MPs on the right of the party are being addressed right now by Robert Jenrick, the former immigration minister, who resigned last week, saying that the bill is too weak to stop the boats. And all day we've had a back and forth of legal advice between the different groups of Tory MPs and the government, which broke with precedent today to publish its legal advice, such as the pressure on it. And by the way, we now know that the Rwanda scheme will cost in the region of £300 million before a single flight takes off.
And do you have any indication of how tomorrow's vote will go?
Well, it's hard to say because there isn't one group of unhappy Tory MPs. There's 6, 5 on the right and 1 made up of moderates who actually feel that the Prime Minister is going too far. It raises the risk that the legislation could be voted down almost by accident due to confusion over how the different groups will vote. And even if the Rwanda plan clears the Commons tomorrow night, it has to go to the House of Lords, where the government doesn't have a majority and where peers will attach lots of unhelpful amendments. It all makes tomorrow's vote a much bigger headache for Rishi Sunak than his evidence today.
Paris at Westminster, thank you. The Scottish businesswoman Michelle Mone has claimed she and her husband have been made scapegoats for wider failings in the UK government's procurement process during the pandemic.
A company the couple were involved with is facing civil and criminal investigations relating to the supply of protective equipment. The Conservative peer denies any wrongdoing. Here's our senior reporter, Gordon Cree.
It's a glossy documentary hosted by a well-known TV investigator.
Hi, Doug.
Hello, Mark. Nice to see you again.
And you, Michelle. Nice to meet you.
Nice
All right?
to see you as well.
Now, for the first time in 2 years, Baroness Mone breaks her silence to respond to the criminal allegations she faced.
But the programme was funded by her husband's consortium PPE MedPro, the company at the centre of the allegations.
Are you going to win?
Yeah, we will win, because we've done nothing wrong. And it's cruel and it's nasty, but we will win. The evidence that we have got and what all the government, the Cabinet Office, everyone knew of my involvement.
She added that she now regrets previously claiming to have no involvement in the company, saying that was done on legal advice. PPE MedPro was awarded contracts to supply medical masks and gowns after Michelle Mone recommended it to ministers. That was part of the process dubbed the VIP lane to help the UK government choose between large numbers of offers. The deal was worth more than £200 million. The company is now being sued by the government for a breach of contract, alleging the gowns were defective. The National Crime Agency is also investigating. Today, on a visit to a community project in Dunbar, Scotland's First Minister called for full transparency.
I think there has to be a serious investigation, independent investigation in fact, into, of course, those PPE contracts from the UK government. I don't make a particular comment on this case, but I would say overall there are serious questions for the UK government to answer in terms of who got those contracts in the relationship with the Conservative Party.
Michelle Mone hasn't spoken on camera about this story before, nor is she doing interviews today. That her response has come in the format that it has done suggests an attempt by her and her husband to take back control of the narrative. The Department for Health and Social Care has said it does not comment on ongoing legal cases. Gordon Cree, STV News.
Well, let's take a look at other stories across Scotland now. And the First Minister has branded a Foreign Office threat to withdraw support for Scottish ministers on overseas visits as petty and misguided. The Foreign Secretary, Lord Cameron, is warning the Scottish Government that Hamza Yusuf's meeting with the Turkish President Erdogan without a UK official president was a breach of protocol. The Scottish Secretary, Alistair Jack, says it was one of 5 breaches at the COP summit last week.
Support staff in colleges across Scotland are set to go on strike again next year after voting overwhelmingly for more action. It comes amid a long-running dispute over pay and job security. The trade union Unison said that college employers had failed to properly negotiate with them to reach a settlement, despite months of strikes earlier this year.
More than a third of offshore workers in the North Sea are too heavy for lifeboats. The Health and Safety Executive has revealed that 36% of employees on rigs weigh more than the maximum of 100 kilograms. The watchdog says it's an ongoing issue of concern. The HSE is urging oil and gas companies to undertake reviews to ensure equipment is not at risk of being overloaded in an emergency.
A Harry Potter book picked up from a bargain bucket in the Highlands has sold for £55,000 at auction. The Philosopher's Stone novel was bought by a woman from Edinburgh at a cafe near Ullapool 26 years ago. It's one of only 500 hardback copies from the first ever print run of the J.K. Rowling series. Other stories in the West now. And the first passengers have boarded Glasgow's new subway trains. 2 were running on the line today after final testing. The new trains will run alongside the existing fleet for now, before more are introduced next year. It's planned that driverless trains will eventually operate on the subway. A man has been charged after cycling on the M8. The cyclist was spotted on the Kingston Bridge pedalling south earlier today. Police have issued a reminder to pedestrians and cyclists that they should avoid using motorways. Patients at a Victorian psychiatric hospital who were buried in nameless grave plots are finally being remembered thanks to a small group of volunteers in Lanarkshire. Their work to restore the old Paupers Graveyard in Hartwood, where people were interred in two groups of 2 and 3 from 1895 until 1952, has seen them named Scotland Project of the Year by the National Lottery. Caitlin Hutchinson has more.
They've been dubbed lost souls, once patients at Hartwood Psychiatric Asylum, long since buried in nameless grave plots. In the asylum's early years, before mental illness was considered treatable, residents would simply be restrained and left in rooms, many of them until their deaths. But a small group of dedicated volunteers is determined their stories are told.
We've got Jock of Law. He's one of our characters who believed that he was a knight of King Edward. He rode a horse, and the kids pricked the heel of the horse and he fell off and he injured his head. All imagination. We've also got Princess Felicia, who's up in the top corner. She believed that the Secret Service was after her, and the Belgian refugee from World War I was brought over 7 months pregnant, and unfortunately after she had her baby, 6 months later, she was placed in Hartwood, obviously postnatal depression. Because she couldn't speak a word of English, her treatment was very limited and she was basically bedbound for 3 years, where she died of TB.
This was home to thousands of patients, and around 1,200 people were buried in 630 graves in the psychiatric hospital grounds, most of whom were recorded as being pauper lunatics with no money or means to be buried anywhere else. John was one of the nurses working on the hospital's most acute mental health ward in the 1970s. Today, he's back to visit his old workplace with his granddaughter.
It was huge. It was like a wee town. There was some of them that had been in hospital for they were teenagers, and they were old men. They didn't know anything else, and it was really, it's quite difficult. And then you got other ones that worked all their days and then had dementia, and they couldn't be looked after at home.
Hartwood closed in 1998, but only recently were record books detailing names and grave markers rescued from a skip, prompting months of meticulous research. Now, name plaques have been installed and the neglected cemetery has become a site for family members to visit their ancestors.
We've had people from all over the world that have got in contact with us, that their relatives are buried here. There's a gentleman comes and sits next to his great-grandmother. Her name had not been said in over 100 years. And he just comes and sits and speaks to her.
Looking at one another again.
They're rightly proud of their award, won for their unfaltering belief that everyone deserves to be remembered. Caitlin Hutchison, STV News, Near Shots.
Now, Scottish Ballet's winter production Cinders has opened at the Theatre Royal in Glasgow, delivering a unique twist on the classic tale that will travel throughout the country, heading to Edinburgh in the new year. Well, Laura Boyd went behind the scenes of the production to find out what audiences can expect from this special version of the show.
It's a tale as old as time, but Scottish Ballet's version of Cinderella, Cinders, turns the traditional roles of the fairy tale on their head.
It's a Cinderella story with a twist. So some nights we'll see Cinders meet her prince, but other nights you might see Cinders meet his princess. Audiences will arrive, and the first instance they'll know whose story they're going to see will be when the curtain rises.
In this version, I'll be playing a princess. So instead of a Prince Charming that rescues a damsel in distress, it will be a female princess that finds her cinders and falls in love.
The dancers have been rehearsing for this spectacular winter production for months, but it's not always been easy to stay on point.
It's been a really magical idea. However, putting it into practice has been quite challenging. I have had some rehearsals where I've been rehearsing the principals and they've had to remind each other which role they're playing because they all learn each other's roles. So yeah, it's been a little bit complex.
Winter shows like Cinders can open up the delights of dance to new audiences and introduce a new generation to the magic of ballet.
We hope to, inspire any kind of young kid watching the show and, just a new generation of dancers, really.
A favourite part for me is the matinee performances, because often that is full of children. It's often very noisy, which I love, and in the interval, most of the time, you can see young people just dancing around the foyer. It is really inspiring, and it's a wonderful reminder to all of us as to why we're doing this.
Well, I had better pirouette my way back to STV before I turn into a pumpkin. But you can catch Cinders at the Theatre Royal in Glasgow until the end of December, before it moves to Edinburgh's Festival Theatre on the 5th of January. Laura Boyd, STV News.
It's incredible, the poise, the balance.
It's so
Now for
predictable,
something
isn't it?
completely different.
It's so predictable, aren't you, John?
On you go.
Carry on. What were you going to say about sport? Want me to tell you?
It was a good week. It was an interesting weekend.
It was an interesting weekend, John. Some big results, none more so at Rugby Park, where Kilmarnock stunned the champions. Good evening. Kilmarnock manager Derek McInnes praised his players' bravery after they came back from a goal down to defeat Celtic 2-1 at Rugby Park. McInnes says his players rattled the champions in a dominant second-half display. Brendan Rodgers admits his team didn't reach the required levels in the second period. It was joy unconfined for the Kilmarnock manager and his players after defeating Celtic for a second time this season, and that too after going into the break a goal down. A stern half-time team talk from Derek McInnes changed the game as his Killie side triumphed by 2-1.
I thought we rattled them. We had some really good moments and concerted pressure, but we never get the goal coming for it. But when the goal did come, I was pleased that there was still enough time to go and get another. And you kind of sniffed it about the place, you know, when we get the goal, and there was a feeling that this was just don't run out of time, go and get another one. And thankfully we managed to get the all-important second goal.
Matt O'Reilly had put the champions one up just after the half-hour mark after reacting quickly in the box. That's his 9th goal of the season. While Celtic dominated play in the first half, the second period was a completely different story. Kilmarnock took the game to the champions. The equaliser came courtesy of an own goal from Nat Phillips in the 75th minute. Then, with just 3 minutes remaining, Matt Kennedy scored the winner. While Celtic dropped 3 points on Saturday, Rangers came back from a goal down to defeat Dundee 3-1. Cyril Dessers, James Tavernier and Abdallah Sima on the score sheet for the hosts. Philippe Clement's side played the second half with 10 men after Jose Cifuentes was sent off. The Alberts Club have appealed the red card. The weekend results mean Celtic's lead at the top is now 5 points, with Rangers having a game in hand. Two former Old Firm favourites gave their take on the title race.
If you looked at this maybe 3 months ago or 2 months ago, you wouldn't have said that this would happen, but this is Scottish football and this is what it throws to you. And if you read everything that everybody's saying, then you know that the league was already done, so it's proved to be very, very different to that. But it's all about getting that win and the game in hand and cutting that, and then a massive game in the 30th at Parkhead.
It's only one game. It's only one game, and everyone wants to turn it on Celtic now. But there's a lot of strong characters in that dressing room. The manager's a strong character as well, so they know what they need to do. They know they're top quality players. They know they've got the squad and strength and depth that they can go and do it, and the manager as well. So I'm sure they will bounce back, no problem.
Craig Halkett says the Hearts players have to learn their lessons after Stephen Naismith claimed his side were bullied by Aberdeen in their 2-1 defeat. Halkett returned to action after nearly a year out, but was unable to prevent the Edinburgh side letting a 1-goal lead slip, with Leighton Clarkson netting an added time winner.
We're all obviously grown men, and if the manager thinks one individual or a group of collective's not been good enough and that's what he feels, then you got to take it in the chin. Ultimately we got beat in the game, so somewhere along the line we've not been good enough. So I think it's just one of the ones you've got to use. Bring something from within to make sure it doesn't happen again.
Motherwell boss Stuart Kettlewell says his players showed a great togetherness as they battled to secure a point against St Johnstone on Saturday. With the Fir Park side 1-0 down, Mika Beareth scored in added time to earn a draw for the hosts. In the top half of the Premiership, St Mirren ended a run of 3 straight defeats with a 2-0 win over Ross County. And Hibs moved up to 4th following their 1-0 victory over Livingston. Scotland will play friendly matches against the Netherlands and Northern Ireland in March as they continue their preparations for next summer's Euros. Steve Clarke's side will be away to the Netherlands on Friday the 22nd of March at a venue to be announced before hosting Michael O'Neill's Northern Ireland at Hampden 4 days later. Rugby and Glasgow Warriors coach Nigel Carolan says they'll need to delve deep into their squad depth to get through the next round of tough games. The Warriors, who were soundly beaten in their opening Champions Cup match against Northampton, now face 3 more games against top European opponents, with festive fixtures against Edinburgh in between.
We've had some really tough opponents in this block, and it doesn't get any easier over the next 5. So, it's important that we use our full squad. We delve right into the depths of it, and everyone is up to speed and everyone's getting game time. The challenge is, can we get all our players to bring the same level of performance every week?
And some snooker news. Ronnie O'Sullivan has withdrawn from the Scottish Open due to medical reasons. The tournament got underway today with John Higgins in action tonight. That's all the sport from me.
OK, thanks very much, Rahman. Well, let's check out the weather forecast now with Sean.
A spell of sea air will be followed by a strong chance of you have to try these. TUI sponsors STV Weather.
A very good evening to you. Thank goodness, a little bit of respite from the rain. I took Thursday and Friday off. We had rain Thursday, Friday all day, had a Saturday and Sunday. Pretty miserable weather. More rain on the way tomorrow outside over Ireland, but for the time being, staying largely dry. Some clear spells through tonight, but the temperatures roughly staying where they were through this afternoon, 5-6 degrees Celsius, and that'll be the highs during tomorrow. So temperatures really flatlining as we go through tonight and also tomorrow. We hang on to the cloud. We'll see outbreaks of rain coming in from the southwest during tomorrow, particularly wet across central and southern areas. So a dull, damp day here tomorrow. The best of the weather the further north we go into northern parts of Argyll and Bute, and particularly as we head into the West Highlands here, we hang on to the best of any dry and brighter weather. But for most of us, a cloudy, wet day tomorrow. Temperatures again 6 or 7 degrees. Now, if you've got plans for Wednesday, it looks as if it shouldn't be too bad a day because we've got a wee ridge of high pressure coming in, so the weather should be dry and bright. Highs about 5 or 6 degrees Celsius, but we've got more rain coming in from the west briefly though on Thursday morning. Now, if you're looking for something more festive, I'm desperate for that cold and frosty weather to come back. However, high pressure building over the Bay of Biscay, drifting into France this weekend. That means it's going to be drawing in much milder air, so no chances of anything festive for the time being. At the weekend, it looks as if temperatures will be well above average, 10 or 11 degrees in some spots, but cooling off potentially for Christmas. Bye-bye.
TUI sponsors STV Weather.
And finally, a Glasgow musical theatre teacher is set to star in the West End production of Mamma Mia after being crowned one of the winners in a reality singing show.
Stevie Dock was chosen for the prestigious part of Sophie after wowing the judges. The 22-year-old says she is just so grateful. Lewis Mickey has more.
Stevie and Tobias!
The winner takes it all. This was the moment Glasgow's Stevie Dock found out she was heading to the West End to star as Sophie in the production of Mamma Mia, the culmination of months of competing against other hopefuls.
I say thank you for the music, for giving it to me.
After all that, Stevie wasn't about to see this opportunity slipping through her fingers. Not just dazzling the judges, she even had them in tears.
I was even. We were both crying, but it was just perfect. I don't know how you could perform after that, because I was just welling up even at the VT and all that.
Not much time to let it all sink in though. Today it was straight into practice. But not before a cuddle from Dad Gary and sister Caris.
It's surreal. I feel very, I feel like I need to process it a bit still. I get through moments of being really, really excited, and then 2 minutes later it's as if I've just completely forgotten that it even happened. I just want to say a big thank you to everybody in Scotland, because I feel like that's a big part of why I got here. I wouldn't have been able to get here without the support of all my people from home. So yeah, thank you so much. My Gran and my sister are like smiling and like all of this. They're like, oh, good luck. My dad's like this.
I mean, my heart was pounding through my chest. It's unbelievable.
We never even heard the boy's name get read out. We were screaming that loudly that we never actually heard who the boy was.
Stevie and fellow winner Tobias will make their West End debut in January. A happy new year indeed. Lewis Mickey, STV News.
Oh, what a voice. That is just fantastic. Well done, Stevie.
Stevie Dock, a name to look out for. That's all of it as from us here. Have a good night. I think that's what I said, yeah. Have a good night.
Good night.